Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Adam Day here from the Farmer Network. I'm joined here by Danny and Maddy Teasdale, who I've been working with within the Farmer Network for a long time now, looking at how we can farm and look after nature better in this part of the world through their company, Ullswater Community Interest Company. So we're just going to have a chat about that and hopefully you'll find something of interest in what we're discussing. We've got our brews together. Cheers. You're on the water because you've had a hard day. Have you been tree planting today?
No, I've been outside. I've been outside getting filmed and...
You've been getting filmed already.
Yeah.
So this is related to the work you're doing with your company, Ullswater Community Interest Company.
Yeah.
Now, as far as I was always aware, you were in part of a family business within a garage and different things like that. How have you come to be the partners and owners of Ullswater Community Interest Company?
Long story. It's a long story, isn't it? So yeah, in a nutshell, I was a mechanic for 25 years, just at Penruddock, family business. But at the same time, we've always liked our conservation and our farming. So we've always sort of married the two together. So it was always very much up at Bex's, like, well, okay, what can you do there? What can you do there? The land's still to let, it's still to graze. And then it's like, well, fence bits of Bex off and then put hedges in and stuff like that.
So Bex's is a farm right on the edge of the Northern Lake District, close to the A66. And you guys actually live in the Lake District down the Ullswater Valley. So you come from a farming background as well.
Yeah.
You're more Ullswater, aren't you?
Yeah, my family's been in Ullswater Valley for over 200 years. Some of them are still farming there, but I farmed in Martindale for a while and then moved up to Scotland and farmed up there as well. Prior to that, I did countryside management at college, but I've always been very aware of the differences between conservation and farming. So it was always an interest, always something, even though I went and did something else later on and trained as did other work, but it was always something when we got together, it was always something we were both very interested in and passionate about, because it's our families and our home and everything, and our history so it sort of all just like linked together that way, didn't it, really? And then we had the sort of the reason to get going with moving this on was Storm Desmond, obviously, so that's when things changed for us, I suppose, and we could get our teeth into actually trying to help.
So farming and Lake District and nature is absolutely in your blood and your DNA.
For hundreds of years, hasn't it? Both sides, hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Gone back, so.
No, it is, and it's something, for me, it's about community as well, isn't it? So we can look back on our communities and we know people and we know our, you can look back and say, oh, such as I knew your granddad, I knew, all that stuff is really important, isn't it, in rural communities, especially I think when you get somewhere as rural as the Lake District and the farmers that have been there for generations. So we've kind of been part of that.
So how did you start in terms of starting to work with local farmers in the community? How did that all start? You mentioned Storm Desmond there.
That was the kickstart.
An unbelievable amount of damage, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Particularly, well, all over Cumbria, but particularly in the Glenridding, Patterdale.
Yeah, Ullswater, that was, that was massive. That was a huge issue, like bridges, like Pooley Bridge washed away. Just so much flooding in the village, it was just unreal, wasn't it? It's like Lake Road was about 8 foot underwater. It was just fences, walls, everything's washed out, completely cut off. Yeah.
And communication wise as well, we didn't have any communications, there was no phones, there was none of that, there was no water for a while. Yeah.
So in terms of starting to put the landscape back together, what did you and the community start to do?
Initially, obviously, because it had washed thousands and thousands of tons of stone downstream and blocked all of the river up, they went through and they moved all that gravel out and they took it all back out of the river because there was about 18,000 tons to get rid of that had come downstream. But that needed doing because ultimately it was all blocked up, wasn't it?
No, absolutely.
And there was great controversy at the time, wasn't there? Because some people were saying you shouldn't touch the gravel, you should leave it. For nature, you'll do more harm than good if you get rid of the gravel. The the community wanted rid because it was a flooding hazard that was going to cause trouble again.
But we were trying to sort of put the case for actually doing other work upstream as well, so that we don't have to do that everywhere, you know, and you know, for the cost effectiveness of it, because ultimately, if we get another one, it's not going to make any difference anyway. Do you know what I mean? So we might as well try and do other stuff upstream that might help in the long run. So that was where we kind of came in, really, because we were, you know, we had that knowledge and that sort of interest that we wanted to make sure it wasn't just about building walls and you know, just we wanted to make sure that we could try and incorporate some sort of natural flood management into it all as well.
So since Storm Desmond, this new vernacular appeared of natural flood management, and I know that you've done a lot of work, not exclusively just for natural flood management, for many other reasons on farms and with nature. What did that start with then? What work were you doing?
So we had a word with the farmers that were in the village that had the land, and we said, you know, if we can get a few quid to open it up and make like a flood relief channel sort of thing next to it, are you all right? And they're like, yeah, go ahead and do that. You do that. We did that, and then you know you get a load of rain now, and it spills over into that flood channel that they use.
And it catches a lot of the stone and the gravel when it's coming down.
A lot of that, and that was a really cheap and a really simple one, and that's just working with the farmer, and that's just. That is what we do, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and then we started off doing tree planting on a lot of the landslides or the areas that looked like they were going to slide at the next storm. Put a lot of trees in, got obviously just landowner agreements, and did that, which everyone was absolutely totally supportive of, because there was some big landslides came down close to farms, and you know it made people think really, and so we were able to do that. So that was really that was the main bit of how we started.
So what happens if you're working with a farmer, local landowner or a farmer, and they say, absolutely not, I need that ground, it's important, it's my haymaking meadow, or it's the best bit of grazing I've got, or...
Well, then that's fine, isn't it? That's there.
So you wouldn't push, that's entirely up to them, and it's right, isn't it? Like, we absolutely don't agree. You should be using good agricultural land for planting trees or doing, works, unless the farmer wants it or the landowner wants to do that, that's fine, isn't it? But we absolutely, or there's other options, there's sort of lighter touch options as well that you can still do, but you don't need to lose your good grazing and your good hay meadow.
There's all sorts of different bits within it, isn't there? There's bits of planting, then there's some bits where you could say you were going to take like a flood embankment down, and then it was going to flood temporarily and temporarily store some water on there, and then go back down and drain. I think that's where the sort of the skill is balancing it all, really, is saying, how can we farm that land, and then how can we have nature recovery, and then how can we have temporary water storage, because we still need all of them things. So this isn't about just blocking something up, letting it all just go away. This can still be, the land can still be used. Yep, it'll chuck it down, it'll flood, but then it goes back again after that. And then a couple of days later on, you're back to using it again. So.
And what sort of trees do you plant?
Well, depends. So there is that saying, isn't there? Right tree, right place. That is important, so that you don't end up going and chucking a load of fir trees on the side of a hill somewhere that no one can ever get down in years to come. If you've got a wet, boggy paddle somewhere, you're going to put willow in it, you're going to put alder in it, you're going to put something that grows in there. If it's hedgerows, like that's most of our planting.
It's all
native hedgerows, isn't it? It's your normal
hawthorn, holly, hazel, everything that's
your normal
traditional
stuff,
and
isn't it?
native.
What should be here?
Yeah, and and again, it's what the farmer wants. Like, we've had some farmers say, I don't want any of that in mine, so we don't do it. Which is fine. Like, that's grand, isn't it?
That's a very polite. That's a very polite way of putting it.
Don't
put any dog rose in there.
Yeah, dog rose.
Yeah, which is fine.
It's the management. And if we're looking at it, you've got to look at it, haven't you? In generations to come, we hope that that's going to be managed. So it's got to be right to start with.
So how many trees do you think you've planted over the years? Could you take a guess at that?
We're starting to work it out now. It's about 120,000 that came up with.
Right.
most of it is hedges. So, like, I was just having a tot up yesterday, about 16.5 kilometres of hedgerow that we've put in.
16.5 k. That's a good number, isn't it?
It's good. It's a good number. This is where, like, we do disagree with the government. The government want to put trees in the ground, but they want to see it as land cover, as hectareage. Well, why not just see it as a linear hedge and say we can get got so many hedgerows out there, and generally no one has an issue,
No,
do
we've
they,
never
with
had an issue.
fettling them back up again?
So we've heard this phrase, which is coming to being. I don't know if it was you guys that christened it hedges and edges planting, but that's certainly found favour with the farming community, hasn't it? Because again, it's allowing them to farm the bits of the farm that they need to.
Yeah.
But the lesser bits, or bits that are more appropriate to farm less or not farm at all, turn back to nature, if you like. That works for farmers, doesn't it?
Of course it does. And there's either a wet bit, there's gills, there's a steep bit you couldn't mow, there's there's something that's all just civvy, or there's something that's bracken. Use them bits. We've got any amount of them.
Yeah, and I think we've always tried and make sure that it fits with the scheme. At the moment, obviously, that's a
touchy subject.
But yes,
quite a few of the government support grants and schemes are on hold at the minute, which is causing a lot of angst to many farmers who are halfway down schemes and need to finish off and now can't.
Yeah.
And those that were ready to go with schemes, but because the rules said you didn't need to proceed at this moment, that there would always be a notice period if things were going to change. Of course, that hasn't happened. So certainly in this part of the world, we know a lot of farmers that are very, very frustrated by what's happened in the last month or so, amongst many other things as well.
Frustrated and worried and panicking. There'll be an awful lot of it. But it was to pull things at such short notice. That's just
Has that affected your work to any extent?
Yeah. We've had work pulled as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
At the last minute through DEFRA.
And I think for us it's that confidence thing, as you know, like let's say we've had no problem. Most farmers are very happy to have hedges or work for the marginal land. But going forward, now they're thinking, well, why should I bother? And so for what we've achieving and what trying to achieve, could be quite a risk really, because understandably, why should farmers, try and plan for that when they're not going to be rewarded for doing it? So I just think, longer term, the impact on this is not just now and this next year, but going forward, the confidence.
Trust's been knocked right back, hasn't it? It's just going to be government and DEFRA and that. It's definitely been knocked right back.
But yeah, we've had funding cut for the flood management work, haven't we?
Yeah.
So,
again, we had a 3-year project lined up, but they pulled at the last minute. That was already agreed. It was meant to start in April. So I mean, they are slashing it right across the board.
And of course, at the same time, although the support payments are under threat now, and certainly, as you said, confidence has been knocked, livestock prices are actually at the highest they've ever been. Mine, so are the cost of production as well.
Yeah.
So it's not all cash in the bank for farmers, but at the same time, a lot of farmers are thinking, that I talk to, are thinking, maybe I go back to trying to think about keeping more stock, because we love farming.
Absolutely.
And it's not a crime to love your job and love farming and sheep and cattle production, is it?
No, absolutely not.
No,
and that's the obvious option for you, isn't it? For them, that's absolutely. But again, for what the government are trying to achieve, this is not going to achieve what for their nature recovery targets. That's not going to achieve that, is it?
No.
From their point of view, so they need to rethink that. But
the frustrating thing is that in the last sort of 7 years that we've been doing this, we've pretty much worked out all sorts of things. You could plant hundreds of thousands of trees. You could do all of this river restoration, the ponds, the wetlands, the nature recovery, whatever you want to call it, and it wouldn't impact, and it doesn't impact the farming. It doesn't have to. This is the thing. You can do all of this, and it'll sit really nicely along the cultural heritage of the whole thing. We can keep all of the small family farms going. You can keep that whole heritage part going. You can keep it strong. You can keep the communities together. You can hold it all together. It just needs funding sufficiently. That's all. But it needs flexibility from Natural England, because there's definitely, it seems, quite an anti-sheep sort of movement from a lot of Natural England.
I'm going to come back to that in a minute as we move towards the finish, because everybody else probably wants to go out and get back to work. If you're sitting watching this now at lunchtime or in the evening, well, hopefully you can relax a bit, although it is lambing time at the minute. I know a lot of people are right up to it. Happens every year. So we'll come back to that. We've talked about trees, we've talked about hedges and edges, we've talked about natural flood management. What other sorts of things do you get involved with? Rewiggling of becks and things like that, that being part of it. Have you done much of that?
We've done a lot of that.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of that.
How much?
6.5 kilometres worth of that.
Yeah,
just like that.
6.5 k of
twiddling our thumbs.
Rewiggling.
Yeah. The thing is,
to achieve what?
All sorts.
Yeah.
So again, it all depends where and on what land. This is the thing. We've generally, most becks, most streams, we've moved them. We've shifted them either to the side of the field. They're normally not really in the right spot, what have you, and they don't really work that well a lot of the time.
So you're going back to traditional practice was, let's make these fields as productive as possible. So we'll actually change the water courses, or we'll make the water try and flow faster in an aim to make sure we don't flood.
That's what they always did.
That's
what they always, the whole idea was always to get that water off your land as quick as possible. That's what everyone was encouraged to do. That's what they wanted you to do. But I just think that by looking at it in the right way, you can put your rivers back into, a lot of the time, it's not even that complicated. You can see that there's a straightened beck or a river over here, and you can see that there's a big wet patch of sieves that's over on this side here, and you think, well, it doesn't take a genius to work out that it actually just wants to be in there. And generally, that wet patch of sieves will be wet and boggy and useless anyways, because that's where the beck, all the water's flown down to. So if you put it into there, yes, you've lost your civic boggy bit, but at the same time, if you're going to get paid for storing water, as we've always argued that people should, in comparison to spending £70 million on a flood engineering scheme, to pay someone 15 grand a year for 20 years to store some water on there, that's a lot of that money should be going on to there. It goes a lot further.
But every project we've ever done, though, has been in a farm. It's still farmed. We haven't said, right, you can't farm that anymore. That land's useless. We've always made it fit so that the farmer can still farm it, and it's shown that you can do that successfully.
And that's the balance that we've talked about so very often, and in some ways is a frustration, I think, in parts of the Lake District and certain valleys and with certain landowners, that it seems a growing polarity between farming and nature. This is what a lot of us struggle to come to terms with, that in many cases it's either or.
Yeah.
I mean, in all of the on-farm environmental work you've done, how many sheep or cattle have had to disappear because of it?
How many do you think? If we said, have a guess.
Well, I know how you work, so I think I know the answer.
Well, it's none.
It was, yes.
It's none. So there is nothing that we've done that has had to remove any livestock. I don't think I'd be sort of drastically out of turn to say that on a lot of the fells it's gone too far now and they're understocked.
Absolutely.
I do think that we're at that point now where we've gone too far the other way, and all that's happening is we're getting fells full of bracken now.
And deer.
Yeah.
And, deer's actually becoming more of a problem for us when we're planting, because you're trying to do the good, and now it's getting knocked back with the deer.
Yeah.
So you would say, with your knowledge in and around your community and your knowledge of farms as well, that we have got to a point where on some fells and commons there are now too few sheep. We hear all the time, don't we? The fells were overgrazed, you know, and without a shadow of a doubt, that was the case in the past through government policy, which was asking farms to keep as many sheep as they could. But I hear it from many farmers around the Lake District, and there's a real fight going on at the minute as to how many sheep there should be on the fells. If there are too few, you've just said there can be problems.
There's, I mean, so you look at, we can't, we mapped out all the bracken around Ullswater and how it was.
Really?
Just,
I didn't know this.
You didn't know this?
No, come on.
There you go. So that's all bracken around Ullswater. So
Right. See that on the camera. The red bits are all bracken. That's the lovely Lake Ullswater, Lake of Ullswater.
So we don't think really.
How is that good for biodiversity ultimately?
Yeah.
There's a very small argument, I think, that it can be good for certain things, but how is that better for biodiversity than having well grazed, well managed grasslands and fell land that can produce so much more than just dense bracken beds? And it makes farming on the fells a nightmare. You know, for gathering and the take and everything, it's just,
Even this morning, I've read a statement from a conservation organisation to say that sheep cannot in any way be seen as a conservation grazing animal and that they need to be removed. I've read that this morning.
See, we'd absolutely disagree with that. And even further than that, we went as far as looking into trying to fund our own private agreements, didn't we? For looking at things like wood pasture in those bracken beds or the bits of area that you've already lost that you couldn't get back. But out of that bit of work,
with sheep, though.
But with sheep,
with sheep grazing.
But this is the thing, and part of that was, and we have the proof of it from that report, that you can have that. You can have wood pasture, and you can have that through mixed grazing and through sheep grazing.
Am I right to say that that's not even allowed in Cumbria, that Natural England say we can't have sheep and wood pasture, but it does happen in other parts of England? Am I right to say that?
There's none of that in Cumbria, no.
Yeah, but you're not advised to. They won't allow it. There's been underlying conversations about it, I think, because apparently it's not national standard, but for obviously years and years we've been told you can't do that here. So you've excluded so many farmers from having that that scheme, that payment, when actually
I just don't.
Should have had it.
I think that it would be too hard now to bring that bracken back to grass where it is. It's going to be such a massive job, but we just have to make sure we don't lose any more, don't we? Mm-hmm. And if we need to be targeting trees, we'll target some wood pasture. That's what we would like to see, is target some wood pasture so that the upland farmers get a decent payment rate for planting some of this wood pasture in bracken beds. And at least then they're getting some use out of it. There's some wildlife benefit to it. It'll knock that bracken back, so there'll be less of a fire risk to it. It's a fight, isn't it? Trying to go against the authority and prove that. But we're getting there.
Hypothetical question, I hope. What would be the effect on your local community if all those hill sheep, those hefted flocks, disappear?
Well, from a community and school point of view, I mean, the families that you'd lose, and we've seen it already. We've seen it hemorrhaging young people.
Seen it already?
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely. I've always said this right from even like Storm Desmond happened, and the people that came out, the young people that dug in and cleaned muck out from the shops, and the track, everybody, that's a farming rural community. And you lose all those people, you lose the ability to maintain all that. The school is losing numbers. They're going to be the lowest they are. I mean, in a couple of years, they've had years where there's been no intake, no reception kids going in, it's already happening. But from a community cohesion point of view, what have you got if you haven't got those people that are living and working in your landscape, because we're like probably at least 60% second homes in Patterdale Parish, which already we see a massive issue with, and it's not. Well, I'm very passionate about it because I just believe that if you lose farming and you lose that care for the landscape and that generational care for the landscape and your heritage and your history, you just lose what all that place is about and what all those people come to see, all that thing that people move there for. What is that? Well, that is that, and you're losing it all if you lose all that.
So those people, and we've heard them and we've sat next to them, we've talked to them, who say that those areas, those hills, are an ecological disaster. What would your response be to that?
Well, it's not true, is it?
And we're not allowed to swear, are we?
So you mustn't swear.
Right, so we won't swear. But I just think, it drives me crazy when you hear people just chuck stuff around all the time. The sheep wreck, the this, the that, the what, and you always just think, have you been up there? Have you actually had a look up there? Because I think people seem to think there's this magic wand where you take all of the sheep off, and then suddenly it just comes back in flowers and trees. And then just like that, you've got this fantastically rewilded landscape with birds and flowers and whatever. It doesn't.
So what's the reality? 10 years down the line, all the sheep have gone off the Helvellyn range. And on the other side, what's the reality?
Well, I would say most of our map is red from bracken. So if you like bracken, then it's cracking.
Bare soil, less birds, less wildlife, because the whole process, isn't it? And it's all about the muck that the birds need for the insects. It's all that cycle that you need. You lose, you don't get it's regenerative. I know that's a buzzword, but
yes.
It's not about. It's everything needs to regenerate, doesn't it? And grass needs to regenerate, and they need regeneration. Well, that doesn't happen by just letting it get overgrown. And
it's a massive knee jerk, isn't it? It's a big knee-jerk reaction again.
People that have made the rules and made the schemes and everything in the last few years have listened to those people that have said exactly that. It's sheep wrecked, haven't they? And unfortunately, they haven't been on the ground and seen people or spoke to people that are actually doing it, that see the reality of it. I don't.
You hear it on social media all the time. Yeah, I've had people that tell me, "Oh, it's quite funny, really." In a way, it's not funny. It's frustrating. People try and tell you that all of these fells, the denuded, the devoid of life, the knackered, all of these upland valleys, there's nothing going on there. But then in the next breath, there's people in Defra and government talking about what a great job we're doing, aren't there?
Yeah.
And how, we need to come and have a look and see what you're doing on there. And you're like, well, you want to make your mind up.
Yeah.
It's either good or it's terrible, isn't it?
Mm.
It's awkward, and a lot of folk they don't want to admit it, and they don't want to hear it. But unfortunately, you can do an awful lot of good for wildlife and nature, and by farming it. It's just not very fashionable, unfortunately.
So let's unashamedly try and finish on a positive, because we know we're on the same wavelength at this end of the table. What does that good, balanced landscape for the future look like to you guys?
You're naturally more positive, so if you want to put a spin on it.
Well, I think we have to maintain the farming systems that we've got, and absolutely improve some of them. There's room for improvement, isn't there? There's always room for improvement, not just with the farming systems, but with biodiversity and enhancement and natural enhancements. But I think it's that not so old-fashioned, but you can go, that mixed farming model that works for the farmer, for the livestock, and for the land. And I think that's the basis of it. It was doing grand, wasn't it, for a long time? So, and I think, looking at that then that produces work for those farmers. You have families that stay in the area, those kids grow up with jobs, all that thing, it's going to take a long time, I think, to ever get back to that, and I hope we do, but I do think that's what it's got to look like. It has to be a mixture and a balance, but we're not going to get that if we just wipe them from,
and then realise that it's a mistake in 20 years.
Exactly, and then
I just don't think that we're far off having a really good model, and I think if there's enough support and there's financial support, and then there's the right people that working together, I do honestly think that there'll be a really good story and a really good, that is my positive spin on it. That it's absolutely possible, absolutely possible. It just needs the right people, needs the correct funding, and then we can just show what we can do.
I think you guys are doing an absolutely amazing job in Ullswater CIC. That balance where farming unashamedly is the central focal point around which all the other good stuff can operate. And the fact that you have embraced farming and improving the natural environment, and in doing so you have the trust of farmers, you have the trust of local community as well, and we believed that you definitely have the trust of government as well, because they've talked to you so often and embraced what you do, and I hope that comes back into fruition in the future. And from the Farmer Network's point of view, we're very happy to work with you where we can. Farmers need to learn nature and environment skills, and conservationists need to learn farming skills as well, and we'll all be the better for it if we have that multi-dimensional knowledge which helps us all understand what that really good balanced landscape looks like. So thank you for coming down and having the chat with me, guys.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can work with you in the future and keep spreading the message that Cumbria, its people, its land, and especially its farmers have a heck of a lot to offer for the future.
Definitely.
Yeah, Adam.